Hello. Hopefully you can all hear me. Can I tell if you can hear me? No, I know I can't tell a thing. So Michael, let me know. But hello to each and every one of you in the chat. I can see that Annie's been chatting a little bit, as has Jamie. Hello, Renee. Yes, I am indeed live. Although I've not had the thumbs up. Now I've got the thumbs up. So yes, I'm live. Excellent. Okay, if you are with us in the chat, hello. If you are not with us in the chat and you are watching later, hello. Let's get on with it. So tonight, it's designing a church newsletter, but it's just going to be as relevant, even if it's not a church newsletter. A newsletter is a newsletter. The examples that I'm using are indeed church newsletters, and a lot of what I'll be talking about will be tips and tricks that I use when I'm editing our church newsletter. But before we go any further, make sure you are watching in HD because we are broadcasting in HD. There is a flag in the lower right-hand corner that should be red. So make sure that it is, and while you're down there, there's a like button, and we like the like button. Now, if you don't know who I am, I'm Elaine Giles, long-time Affinity user, since the original Affinity designer was in beta, and everybody was so excited at a potential alternative to Illustrator. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've used all of the Affinity apps every day since then. Right, everything that I talk about tonight, why aren't my slides moving? There we go. Everything I talk about tonight is going to be cross-platform, Windows and Mac. We are still, yes, still, waiting for the iPad version of Affinity. As I've said, I think it could be a little bit longer. I don't think they're in a particular rush, but they usually, Canva usually have a keynote around the end of March, early April time. So might be an idea to watch that. Right, this is what I have for tonight. It's quite an agenda, isn't it? I'll be talking about flat planning, which you may or may not ever have heard of. I briefly mentioned it in one session a while back, and people got giddy because they had never heard of it and loved the idea. Then I'll be talking about accessibility, which is specifically important if it's a church newsletter. Then how to source assets, because sometimes you end up with assets that are of very poor quality, as you will see. Then I'm going to create the document, so a complete document set up in Affinity. We'll create the cover, we will add the content, we will add some images. Then there's the thorny matter of the mass table, which is a table. It could be created manually, but I've got a different way to share with you. Then I'll be creating a table of contents, but I'll be doing it in two different ways. Then we've got the print and digital distribution, which I will also briefly talk about at the beginning. And how to optimize the final output. Then we have some free resources for you. So specifically if it's a church newsletter, but just as relevant really if it's not. Right, we will be having a Q&A, so put your questions in the chat as we go along, and we will collect them ready for the Q&A at the end of the session. If you can remember, please put a Q at the beginning. It makes it a little bit easier for Mike to sort them all out from the rest of the chat. And give us a little bit of context. I was on a session this week and people were asking questions, and some of the questions were, can you show us that dialogue box again? Which one? and then the person in charge said, I should have asked for context, shouldn't I? And I'm sitting there nodding, saying, yeah, oh yes, indeed you should. So give as much context as you possibly can. It'll make things a little bit easier. Right, we love to read the chat, so please keep it friendly in there. As I always say, I am not affiliated with Canva nor Affinity, never have been. I'm just a customer of both, and that is it. So, designing a church newsletter. Now, I'm assuming here that we've got a lot of people with us who are interested in doing this in Affinity, but at the moment, they are using Microsoft Publisher, which is very popular. Our church uses Microsoft Publisher for this. But sadly, Microsoft Publisher is end of life as of the 1st of October 2026. Originally, they said if you have it installed, you can carry on using it, however dangerous that might be. But then I got another message that said it's going away and we're taking it off your computer, which was like, well, that's not good, is it? So it is definitely end of life, and I would suggest moving. Whether you move to Affinity or not, that's up to you. But if you are thinking of doing that, I have a new series, Life After Publisher, which is your guided path to Affinity. As you can see, there is a countdown there. It's telling you how many days before it goes away. It is a whole cohort and it is coming soon. If you want to get on the wait list, you will get today a document which is frequently asked questions all about Publisher and switching to Affinity. So if you would like to join the waitlist, that is the URL for it, and there is the QR code for it. I will mention that again at the end. Right, but we're starting off with pre-production considerations. Because done right, you can save yourself a ton of time before you even start. So what are those pre-production considerations? Well, the first thing that I always do is a flat plan. So put in the chat if you've heard of a flat plan or if you use a flat plan. Now, a flat plan could be digital, but I don't recommend it. I know that's surprising for me, isn't it? But I find the analogue way of working much better. But this is what a flat plan could look like. This would have 28 pages, and the cross to the left of page 1 and to the right of page 28 is indicating, because this is like an A5, an A4 piece of paper folded in half with two A4, A5 pages for each spread, that you cannot put content on what would be page 0 or page 29. Now, that indicates to you, like if it's the middle, you want to put something in the middle, then that would be pages 14 and 15. If you wanted to put your mass table, in this case, on the back page, that would be 28. And that is one way of working. If I was doing that with the way that I work, it would look like this for our church newsletter, which is A4 in terms of page size, but it's a spread. So the physical page is A4 folded in half, and we have 8 A5 pages to go at. Now, that is what we always used to do before COVID. COVID changed everything in terms of we now have a dedicated digital magazine or church newsletter, and that one can have as many pages as we like. If it's printed, it must be a multiple of 4 pages or it won't work though. So we have another version that is printed where we have a fixed number of pages. Now, that is really what you're indicating here with a flat plan. But when I say analogue, I mean physical. I take A4 pages, so I would take 2 A4 pages, I would lay one on top of the other and fold them in half. And then I draw on it with a pencil to indicate what I'm putting where. It could be adverts, it could be the mass table, it could be the bidding prayers this week, but I just very quickly rough it out on paper first. There's nothing worse than starting in any application, it doesn't matter if it's Microsoft Publisher or Affinity, and getting confused as to what's on what page. And as Mike can attest, inserting a page isn't always as simple as it might be. Is it, Mike? No, it's not. Mike got himself into a right old pickle. So having this in front of you, you know instantly where everything goes and where it belongs. So I would say always start with a flat plan. Specifically, if you're moving to Affinity from Publisher and you know what you've got in Publisher and everything just works, and you're looking at this new app and thinking, I'm overwhelmed. So to be able to have that physical reference is very, very useful. Right, so on to accessibility. Bugbear of mine. I know it's got to be accessible, but I must admit, this was what I did first of all when I was making a template for our parish's newsletter. Now, our parishes was at this stage 3 parishes, 3 local churches. We are now 2 local churches. We lost one. You would say they went independent or got a free transfer. But I thought that font looks nice at the top. That's perfect. We can read it. You know, it's capitals. No problem at all with that. Yeah. That was what I designed. That was what the priest decided on. Now, the main difference, obviously, is the font. And his argument was, I don't think they would be able to read the other one. Now, you let me know in the chat. That, to me, perfectly readable, just saying. But that's what we ended up with. So if you've got an argument with a design, don't look at me. It was the priest. Now, he has a good point, though. that you can't make the font sizes too small, because you've got to consider the age of the audience, the demographic of your audience. You know, if it's children, you may not want a serif font. If they're older, you might want a serif font, but you've also got to think about the size of the font, because an 8-point font might tick all your design boxes. But if no one can read it, you will have complaints. Absolutely, you will. The other thing to think about are colour considerations for those with colour vision deficiency. More common than you would think. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Now I've got a recording error on this. We're going to leave that there and come back to that. But we all see things differently, and your job's to make sure that the audience can consume the content with as little friction as possible. So let me show you some resources that are available that you can use. Right, first of all, I'm going to have to click that, and that's going to get itself excited. I've no idea what's happened there. Hopefully the other recording is still working. Other than that, we're going to have to rely on YouTube. Oh, never a good thing, that, is it? Never a good thing. Right, let me go to Vivaldi and show you these things. Now, I start with this one, which is Coolers. And this is a colour contrast checker. And what it's doing is showing you that if your text colour was this hex code and your background colour was this blue, that is what it would look like. And this is what the contrast is. And as you start changing this, because I've seen black and white works really well. It's a great contrast. So if we were to go in here and choose black, and we were to go in the background and choose white, you'll see contrast super. Couldn't be any better. But I once attended a presentation at our local Mac group. And while we could read everything on the slides, because it was plain black text on a plain white background, I couldn't concentrate. It was too bland. Really, it did put me off. So I understand that you may want to test out different colours. But look what happens if you do something like this. It's telling you it's very poor. You need to increase the size of the text. You know, the contrast is shocking, and it will give you this. Now, it will also say, click to fix it. So what would you like to do to fix it? And this one says, adjust the background colour. So what it does is it lightens it up, but it keeps it within the same tone. Now, we know, because we check black and white, that 21 is perfect. And this is 10. But notice that it's still green in the background. And what happens is, as you change this, that background changes. So let me see that there's an amber one in the background. And as it gets too similar, it goes to red. So this is one way to check out your colours and see what it makes of them. Because again, what looks really nice in terms of design can be really poor in terms of accessibility. So that's one option you've got. Now, all of these links I'm making available in some resources, but Mike will put them in as we go as well. This one is Scheme Colour. It's doing exactly the same thing, but you just may prefer the interface of this version. And again, what you can do in here is choose a different colour. You see it's changing the colour there, and the contrast ratio is changing. So we're going from green down to red, with sort of, you might want to think about that, down to this is really bad, don't do that. So exactly the same options, just a different interface for it. We then have this one that would enable you, if you haven't got a clue, and more specifically, your priest isn't demanding in terms of colour, you may want to set up an entire document and a brand guide from scratch. So in here, you can choose standards to adhere to. You can create background colours. You can choose font families. And that gives you this at the bottom. You can then generate a colour palette for it and work your way through that. So this one is doing a little bit more. Which one you use depends on how much you need it to do and what you've already got. And then you've got this one, which again, it's very similar. Some of you may not like this one. It's Adobe. It's Adobe Colour. But it does a reasonably good job with this. What this one is giving you is saying it's passing for the graphic components, and it's passing if the text is big enough. But once the text is smaller, no, it doesn't work for 17 points and below. So it is actually giving you much more information. If we change that, you can see then it starts to pass because you've got a higher contrast between the background and the colour. And if you make the background even lighter, oh, it'll really love you. So this one is giving you a little bit more information. Like I'm saying, which one you use depends on what you're trying to achieve with it. Those are just 4 examples of what you could do for that. So let's get that out of the way and go back into there. Next thing to think about is your assets. Now, I talk about assets because so many people, particularly church newsletters, I see, they'll put in the reading and do a graphic search for images and just use one randomly. But you can do better than that. And all of these that I'm showing you are totally free. Now, you can pay for church assets if you want to, but there is a wide range that's completely free. So again, I've put these links in the church newsletter resources that will be available at the end. But this one is free pick. And these are just generic religious style images. So you've got coloured ones, you have black and white, you've got icons, you've got photos. You could, with this, sort of like this bottom one with the hands, you could put text over the top of that, but some of these you can just use them as they are. So this is also free pick, but this time I've put in Easter as the search. Another one I had was Lent. No, this one's Christmas. So I put Christmas in and I got Christmas ones. Now, sometimes for Christmas, you're going to want the Advent candles, in which case put in Advent candles. But all of these images are completely free and you are licensed to be able to use them. Then there's icons. So this one is from Flat Icon. And these are just icons, but they are quite useful for the news items and smaller stories, just to break up the text and put something next to it. You could also create a brand guide for your newsletter, be it a church newsletter or a standard newsletter, where people get used to what the icons mean. So maybe you've got a tip and it's a light bulb or something like that. So you could do that. Right, now once you've got your assets, let's get on to the document production side of it. So this is production and it's document setup. Now today am creating this completely from scratch. We will end up with a church newsletter. It will not be as full as the one that I edit, which I can show you if you like, but it will have the majority of the content in it. So let's go and do that. So in here, if you are new to Affinity, this is the new file dialog box. And this has 2 distinct views, very distinct views. What it is set to at the moment will allow you to create a completely new blank document, no content, but you will be able to change the settings on the right-hand side here. Now, we could just start from there, but the very first thing to think about is, and I would have just said this in terms of make sure you choose A4 or A5, depending on the size you want. But I had a conversation with a parish secretary this week who swore me blind that their newsletter was A4. And therefore she was making it A4 and I was swearing her blind just as much. No, it's A5. No, it's not. She said it's A4. So I thought, okay, let's ask the question. I said, what makes you think it's A4? And the answer was, because I put A4 paper into the printer. I thought, indeed you do. But when it prints out 2 pages on the front and 2 pages on the back. Ergo, in Affinity, that's A5, not A4. I think I managed to convince her in the end, but only time will tell. So we now have, post-COVID, 2 newsletters, as I mentioned. We have our standard one, which would be A5 pages in a 2-page spread. But we also have what's now called the one-pager. And the one-pager is indeed A4. So this is the point that you make your decision. Am I going for A4 or am I going for A5? Can you change it later? Yes, you can. You can change everything about your document later, but you'd have to double check all the content to make sure nothing is truncated. So it's always good practice to get the right starting point for your document. Now, when I said this dialog box has 2 distinct views, it does. We also have the home view, which is home as the first tab in here, which has your recent documents, it has your favourites, and it has presets. It will also show you more recents. So this is the FAQ document I talked about. This was the master styles I was looking at, and this actually is our parish's newsletter template that I am working on creating for our parish secretary right now. You also have access to learning materials, your own templates, so these are all my templates. It would make sense to make a template for your newsletter, but you don't do that straight away because you need placeholders and styles and settings all in there. You need to take it as far as you possibly can before you make that template. So in here, I'm going for a preset, which is A5. Because I know it's printing out to A4 paper, but it's 2 A5 pages. Right, then you have all of the options in here. So it has the page width and height. You can switch that round, but our document is portrait. Then in here, you get to specify whether you're having artboards, whether you're having a transparent background, all of which might not mean anything at the moment, in which case just leave them alone. You will have image placement, and mine is set to prefer embedded. I think for church newsletters, that's probably wise. I've seen file management in churches, not good. So I would leave it, and what that means is when you insert an image into your document, it is saved with your document. It travels with your document. You are not going to get the dreaded error message of I can't find this graphic, go and find it for me, because it would be embedded. Right, you also in here now can say that you want to import text files and link to them, which is great if you've got somebody else editing the text file, but it's not utopia, because it means that you've got to be even more careful that their editing didn't have a knock-on impact with the rest of your content, that somebody hasn't changed the 300-word reflection to be 550 and now it won't fit. So I leave that at the moment turned off. Then we've got multiple pages. Now for this, we do need multiple pages. I'm going to go for the 8-page one. So as soon as I turn multiple pages on, I get the facing pages options. And I do want them facing. I want them horizontal, and I want to start on the right-hand page, which matched our flat plan. And I'm going to make 8 pages. So all I've really done in there so far, the only change I've actually made is to say 8 pages. So multiple pages is what I've done. Right. Other thing I'm going to do in here is put some margins on it. Now, I think I made them 10, but we'll see. You can change all of this later. Now, one question I do get a lot is, I need to put a bleed on it. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? A bleed is used if you're sending your document for print. Now, sending for print is not the same as sending it to your printer in terms of your physical printer in the corner of the room. If that's what you're doing, you don't really need a bleed. If you are sending it to a print service, they will tell you what bleed you need, and you could put a bleed on it. If you don't know at this stage, then add a bleed, just in case. It's easier to add it now and ignore it later than it is to add it later. For me, I know that this is being printed by the monster printer in the corner, and it's going nowhere near a print service. They're too expensive. So I don't need a bleed on this. And then create the document. Right, what that then gives me, that margin looks mighty big, doesn't it? Maybe I did have it smaller, but never mind. We will work with it. We've got our 8 pages that look a little bit like our flat plan. Page 1 at the top, 8 at the end, and our 3 double-page spreads in the middle. Now, what else do we need to set up in there? Well, this is a page, this is a spread. That's the difference between them. If you are coming from publisher, this also added into the, is it A4 or is it A5? It doesn't display like this in the page list. It displays them as pages. But when we print it prints it as spreads. It's just in here, it displays it as spreads if it's spreads. If they're not facing pages, then they will be individual pages. If you have a preference to do it the old way, the way that publisher would do it, go for your life. But this enables you to visualize the layout much easier because of the spreads. So I would leave it like that. Now, this is the point that you may think to yourself, oh, do I make a template at this point? And I would say, no, not at this point. Because you have no content in it. We've not changed anything so far, and we're going to make quite a few changes. But what I will do in here is save it. So let's save it in there as newsletter in the root of the folder, just in case, it might go mad. I could well imagine that it would do. Right, next thing to think about is the actual cover itself. So the cover is going to need specific information, but it also needs to be enticing as well and need to work on multiple devices. So let's go in and I will replicate the cover that we use as far as I can. Right, so the cover, of course, is going to be on page 1. And you saw that I had some text at the top. So my text at the top said Our Parish's newsletter. I think the priest wanted to call it bulletin as well, but I wasn't going that far. That's not happening. Right, so I'm going to get that in place. Now, I've used artistic text for this, so I can scoot it down, and it's not frame text where I would need to manually size it. It's sizing automatically to fit what is in here. I think that was the font. It could have been Poppins. I can't remember now. Maybe it was Poppins. Let's have a look what Poppins looks like. Was it Poppins? No, I don't think it was Poppins. I think it was that one. Now we have 3 images on our cover. But before I go any further with any of that, is there anything else I need to set up in here? Now, this very much depends on what you're doing. In terms of, we've already configured the margins, we've configured a bleed if you need it, but now in here, do we need to do anything in terms of guides or grids maybe? Now for the front cover, probably not. But if you were going to do that, then this would be the time to do it. The other thing to think about is master pages. If you've never heard of master pages before, they enable you to put repeating elements on multiple pages without adding them manually. Obviously, the classic example of that is a page number. Now, I didn't tell it to make a master page. That's not catastrophic. It can be done in hindsight, so let's do that. I'm going to add a master page here. Notice, because the entire document is set to be facing pages, it gives me 2 pages. And it's also going to call this Master A if I do that. So I will say to that, OK, and we've got that in there. Now, the reason that I bothered to make a master page was, if the pages that I'm putting in here for the stories, the news items, need to be laid out nicely, then it might be an idea that I've got a grid to do that with, and you can do that. So inside your view, you can see your guides. And at the moment, there's no guides. Now, we've got guides and we have columns. So also in here, we have our margins, and you can see they've come through, they're in blue. Guides can be added where you click it and it adds a guide at the midpoint, and you could put a vertical guide in if you wanted. I think that's also at the midpoint, which is not in the slightest bit helpful. Let's put that in at 50 and we can see it. So this would enable you to put something in a specific location. But at the moment, we don't really need that. What we need is that our text flows nicely. So not a guide at this point. So I'm selecting in there and deleting them, but columns might be handy. So at the moment, there's 1 column and we can't see it. But if we turn on to 3 columns, we get to see them. You can see 2, 3, however many you need. You can put rows in if you want, but we're not going to need to go that far. And the gutter is the gap between them that's showing in white. And I think for this, we're not really going to need much more than 5. In fact, I would only use this for layout of the images, to be honest. But that is how we do it. Now, we've done it on a master page. If we go to our spreads by double-clicking, nothing there. There would have been if we'd created a master page when we created the document. But we didn't, did we? So I would need to apply Master A to pages 2 and 3, 4 and 5, and 5 and 6 and 7. Right, which is very simple. Drag, drop. The only caveat with that is make sure that you drag from the middle. You drag from the side, you can see it will do it, but as I hover, we get a blue border, and the blue border is indicating where it will apply. If I do that, and we look at this page, I've only got the columns on the left-hand side. I didn't drop it in the right place. So I'm going to undo that and do it again, which is drag it and drop it to the middle so the blue border is around both pages. And then we have one more. There is another way to do that if you don't like dragging and dropping, which is to right-click on it and say Apply Master. It will give you a list of master pages. We only have one or none. And we want to apply Master A to it and click OK. So that is another way to do the same thing. So this is the stage that we're setting the document up, configuring the margins, the bleed, contemplating what needs to be in the template, and creating the cover. So let's go back to the cover. Now the cover could be a master page of its own. I did do that for hours, but that was pretty much because I didn't want anybody fiddling with it. But in here, we'll just create the cover in here. So the first thing I need on here is some placeholders, picture placeholders, which is this tool over in the toolbar, which is the picture frame rectangle tool. Click on there once and then draw out an image, or in this case, a placeholder. Now we have two churches, and the image that you see in here is one of the churches. And then underneath that, we have another image of the other church. So it looks like that. We also, on these, have a border, a stroke on it. So if I select the pair of them and I go into the swatches, we can see that we have two colour wells here. This one is for the fill at the front, and this one at the back is for the stroke. So at the moment it's set to black, but there's nothing there. That's because in the stroke panel, you need to apply that stroke and then tell it what kind of stroke you want. So ours is black, and I think it's probably around 3 points, something like that. So there is an image of the church, the bigger church of the two at the top, smaller one at the bottom. We also then have another image, which is kind of the image of the week, and that goes there. Now notice this time it had a border on it. Where did that stroke come from? Wasn't there before? It, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on if that's what you want, puts a border on it because it remembers what you did last time. So if these two borders had been red, the new border on here would be red. We don't tend to put a stroke on this image, so I can just turn that off. I don't have to go in and change the swatches, I just turn it off in the stroke panel. And the only other thing that we have on the front of this is this week's readings that we put on the cover. And that goes in a box down here. Now, when I say goes in a box, we kind of have it look like this, with a background. Now, we don't have a background like that. We would say in here that we don't really want the fill. We do put a stroke on it, so turn the stroke on, and then we have content inside it. Now, that's what I'll go for, because that's sort of what it looks like, right? Like that, so that's in the middle. But at this stage, I don't really want these things moving around. So one thing to think about in here is naming these layers, which are the elements you have on your page, and locking them so you don't move them inadvertently. So I can afford to lock the lot there. The one that's most important to lock is this rectangle at the bottom, because the information that's going in here isn't just text-based, it needs to be laid out nicely. And how it's going to be laid out nicely is I'm going to make a table to put it in. So I'm using the table tool, and I've locked that border because I don't want it moving as I'm starting to work with the table. Now the table I needs to have 4 rows and 2 columns like that. So it's very easy to draw that out. But it's also far too small. So I'm just going to undo and show you. You may think it's a good idea to say, well, I want it that big. Yeah, now you've not got 4 rows and 2 columns. But you can fix that. So I've clicked on the double-headed arrow, taken that down to 2, and in this one, I'm going to double click and type 4 and then press enter. And that is what I need. Now you're saying yes, but it's still not right. But now I've got the correct number of rows and columns, I can use these white handles to pull it down and get nice spacing in there. So I can put it in the middle of that. I sometimes get a question, why didn't you just put a border on the table? Well, look at it. The border isn't that close to the text. It's much more spaced out. So rather than put in columns and rows I don't need to try and get the border right, just put the border behind it and everybody's happy. Now, this table here, I now need to put the content in. It isn't going to look great. Let's just say that from the beginning. So what I have here, and you're going to experience these problems as well. Let me show you what I'm actually working from. It's a text file. This is what needs to go in the first column, and these are what needs to go in the second column. So I've copied what needs to go in the first column. When I paste, not good. It's all gone in the first cell. Right, if I select them all, it still goes in the first cell. It's annoying, isn't it? If I paste as plain text, it still goes in the first cell. Right, so that isn't going to work. So the best thing we can do in there is copy just one at a time and paste in there. Not arduous when there's 4 of them. I'm going to show you something amazing later, which will automate all of this, but this is what it would take to do it manually. So there's our second reading, and there is the Gospel reading. Which, oh no, we've got Zephaniah as the first one. That's going to be interesting, isn't it? Will it fit? But first of all, we have a problem. And the problem that we have at this stage is that text is far too close to the top and the left-hand side. What I'm going to do in here is select all of those. And we now have a context-sensitive toolbar, which has on it some alignment options. And we have the vertical alignment. So at the moment it's top aligned, and that's what's wrong with it. So we will centre that vertically, and that looks a whole lot better. Then I need the actual content in there, and I'm certainly not going to type that. Can you imagine me trying to spell Zephaniah in a demo? Wouldn't end well. Right, then we have the Psalm, which is all numbers, and our second reading, and finally the Gospel reading. So all I'm doing is copying and pasting from a text file to get those in there. Now, if you are ahead of me at this stage, if you're thinking of making a template, now I'm not going to make a template today, but you would do, then you don't need this in. So you may need, and I would suggest that you do, create your first issue and don't worry about a template. Otherwise, you'll be backwards and forwards like a yo-yo, adding content and then thinking, no, that needs to come away for the template. And you'll be opening the template and constantly editing it. It's easier to create the template later. And you would do that by duplicating your file and taking away what you don't need. Simple as that. Now, we do have in ours here, because what I'm going to show you is what that would look like if it's printed out. And what it would look like is that, which means that the borders on this table are actually physical borders. They're there. The problem we've got with that, when we look at it, is, and the text is far too close to the actual border to look nice. But if we select that, you will find that there is a table panel inside Affinity. So I have that table panel off screen here, but you will find all of the panels listed down in here. And the table one is there. So we have table and we have table formats. I'm working with the table panel. What this gives us, so I'll fold it up so it's easier for you to understand. This is not a full extravaganza on tables. That would take another 2 hours. But what it is enough to get you going. So in here, we have these 6 groupings we can work with. This first one is referring to the frame of the table. If you wanted a border just around the edge, you could put it around the frame. I'm not going to do that. So I'm not playing with that at the moment, but I am going to think about the stroke and fill here in terms of what colours you want it and in terms of the cell. Now, this is the important bit. Right, these that we have here are too close to the edges. That is, the size of a cell is controlled with the width and height, and the placement of the text within each cell is controlled with the inset. At the moment, all of the insets are set to 0.1, which I guess is better than 0, because then they're actually touching. Now, I know that that needs to be 2 millimeters. You might think, well, you could make that bigger. Yes, but look at Zephaniah, and there's ones that are longer than that. And I don't really want that wrapping too much. It will look odd if it wraps too much. Now, there are things that I can do in relation to that. At the moment, these 2 columns are equal. So one thing I could do is in here, I could hover there and just stretch that back. And that will give me a little bit more room should it be longer. But I wanted to show you that in here, when we're adding the inset, there is a chain icon, and that links the insets. If you wanted to have an inset on the left that was bigger, you could do that, but you would need to break the chain first. You can then relink them, but if I go in there and say, yep, that needs to be 2, you'll notice it sets the left one back to 2. So that's what that chain icon does. But that is looking a whole lot better now. It's got room to breathe. That's what it needs to look like. So that is the table panel, which I'm just going to get out of the way for the moment. We will be back with that later. That is pretty much our front cover. We do have a text box, which we have up there, a little bit lower than that, and just so we can see all of these images, right, about there, and I would put it about that wide, and this would be what Sunday it is. So I think this week is the 4th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and it's year A. So it would say something like that, and it would have the date on it. Obviously, at this point, that is left aligned. It would make sense to be right aligned. So I will right align that in that box. Now, if I'm making a template, I'm going to have to take that out, which is probably a good thing. If you leave text in it saying the 4th Sunday in Ordinary Time, or anything else, when you make a new document based on that template, you may think, oh, that's already in there. Yeah, but it's the 5th Sunday of Lent now, and you might need to deal with that. So I would, if I was doing that and making it a template, I would take that out and I would put date. And that way I can see there's something missing. But we are making an entire newsletter here, so let's do that. Right, we have our front cover there. I've used the margins for alignment and I've aligned everything to it. Now in here, we need some images. Now I'm just going to use the stock panel for this, and I'm just going to type in church. YouTube via Google don't like me using real content. So although this is real content, it's not naming anybody, GDPR problems. So I'm just going to use some churches that we've got here. These are not our churches, but I will put the link into our site if you want to go and see them. So we'll have that one dragged and dropped into there. Well, that didn't work, did it? Right, okay, I think I know what I did. I locked them, didn't I? Which seemed like a good idea at the time. But we don't really want to do that. So let's unlock these so I can put things in them. All right, let's try that again, shall we? Let's add that into there. Now, you saw the difference. If it's locked or you don't add it to a frame, it sticks it all over the top of everything else. It can be fixed, but it's easier to do it right. Now, this is a picture frame. So we have all our picture controls, meaning we can rotate the content. Doesn't look good. Leave it alone. Let's undo that. We can move the content. So if you particularly wanted to see that bit of it or that bit of it, you could do that. We also have the slider at the bottom where we can make the whole thing bigger. So let's zoom in a bit so we can see that. And now we can move it like that. That looks perfect. Right, and we need another one for the top here. So what have we got? There was a nice one, I think, in a field. Not very nice. I don't know why the Eiffel Tower's come up. That's anybody's guess. And I don't really want something as fancy as Notre Dame, do I? Let's go for that one. Right. And it's having a think about that. Oh, that one looks really nice. Right, so all I've done with that is use the stock panel to drag and drop some images in. This image I'm going to come back to. This changes on a weekly basis, and it usually has something to do with the readings or something, so it could be Mother's Day or something like that. But I'm going to come back to that one for a very good reason. Right, so we have a cover at that stage. Right, the next thing to think about is all of the content. So, in terms of the content, I've got, when we had reflections, we had readings, we had prayers, and other content like news items and things like that. So I'm going to do all of those in one go to show you what you can do with that. What should be separate and what should be with something else in the same frame. So in here, the content for us starts on this page. Now, one thing we do, and still people get it wrong, is on the left-hand side, we actually have a dark box. So a box like that, but instead of the stroke being black and the content being transparent, in here we switch those round. So the background is black and we put our contact details in there. Now I'm just for this demonstration, let's put a text box in it and put contact details. I'm not going to be putting the contact details, but that's where the contact details go. Now, that, of course, isn't going to be able to be seen if it's going over that black box. So I would need to make sure here that that was white and then move it into place like that. I would make this the width of that and then I would centre it because I don't want it too close to the edge. I don't want it too close to the top either. You'll notice that this time I've used a text box, not artistic text. But in here, what I can do is double click on that and it will shrink it up so I can then put all of the contact details in there. And I would probably make that bit bold as well so we can read it properly. And that's where our contact details go. Now, I must admit that is on another master page because I don't want it editing. But it's a demonstration. I'm showing you principle here. Now, if it's a standard magazine or newsletter, you could put editor's details in there and submission URLs and things like that. What we do fills about half of it. And then in the bottom half, we have next week's readings. So we've got this week's readings on the front cover. But if people want to swat up and prep early for next week, we put them on that block at the bottom there. Right, I don't need that text file opening. What I do need is this. The other thing that we do is we put in today's Mass, and that is the Psalm response, the Gospel acclamation. I think that's all we do now. We used to put the communion thing in, but we don't anymore. So what, again, I've got is that in a text file, and that is what this would look like. So that's going to go in at some point. But also going to go in is a reflection. And this is what the reflection looks like. Now, one thing to think about. This is in markup, a markdown format, as you can see, where we've got reflection at the top with one hash. And we can even colour code that if you want to see it lit up. So we've got the reflection and then we've got the title of the reflection. But we normally get this via email. And this is when the trouble starts. We end up with weird characters because it's copied and pasted out of email. We also end up, if you look at it in a text editor, with it looking like this. Just huge swathes of spaces in it for no reason whatsoever, other than the fact it come from email. So I would, if you were doing this properly, this is my part of it because I edit it. I don't generate the content. If I'm looking at it, and I think, oh, there's two spaces in that. So I'm in Affinity, and I think the gap's too big. Somebody's put two spaces in it. I take out one space, and the whole lot goes wrong. Everything just looks a complete catastrophe. At that stage, what I do, I take the text out of Affinity, I put it in a text editor, and I look at it. And normally, it looks something like this. There's probably 2 or 3 occurrences where it looks like that. Right, you may not be used to using a text editor, but a text editor is your best friend. If you're on a Mac, there is a free text editor called Edit, and if you're on Windows, I think EditPad Lite is free. You should also have, what's the text editor on Windows, Mike? Notepad. No, it's 20 years since I used Windows. Right, Notepad++ is free and better. There you go, you heard it from Mike. Well, you heard it from me because his mic's off, but never mind. So what I would do with that in here is not click and then start backspacing. No, I would double click and that selects all the spaces and then press the space bar once. Problem solved. Double click, space bar once, double click, space bar once. The other thing you can do is do a find and replace and make sure that there aren't two spaces after a full stop. Oh, my pet peeve. Don't do that. I think it's probably the age and when people who are producing this content learn to type. Oh, but you always have to put two spaces after a period. No, you do not. Not anymore, you don't. Because if you do, you're making Affinity's job way harder in terms of laying out this text so it looks reasonable, because you're forcing spaces in where there don't need to be any. So help Affinity out and don't put two spaces anywhere. Nowhere at all. So we can see in here that that is absolutely fine. I fixed it. So what I'm going to do now is put somewhere in here that this can live. So what I mean by that is, let's give it a text frame to live in. Now ours looks like that. You will notice here that it has centered it. And if I put hello world in there, you're thinking, what's going on? Remember what I said. It always remembers the last text that you created, which was white, wasn't it? And centered. Oh, indeed it was. That's what's wrong with it. Right. So what I'm going to do in here, we have some text styles. I've done swathes of sessions on text styles, and I'm not going over all of that again. You will be blessedly relieved to know. But I'm using the default ones that come with it and adding a couple as we go along. So the best thing I can do here is click body, and that will turn it back into something that I can see that is a starting point for me. Right, so I am then going to copy my reflection and paste it in, and that is what we get. Now, this reflection at the top would probably be a heading of some description, and we do have a heading 1. I've also shown you how you can process Markdown, but that's not today's demo, so I'm just manually getting rid of it. And that would be a heading 2, something like that. But we can see that I can't fit all of the reflection in there. We can tell that because I have a red triangle and I have the eyeball. The eyeball will show me the overset text, which is fine and good, but it doesn't help me do anything with it. Whereas this will help me set that text. So I'm going to create another frame over here and link this frame on the left with this frame on the right. Like that. Now, actually, that is what our newsletter looks like. And what I would do with this is this text is too big. It's 12 points. Now, I did say there is a happy medium between being too big to fit the content and too small that people can't read it. Problems. Now, most of the time in here, I'm going to edit the base style, which should have the size on, which is 12. Before I make any changes in there, I would look at the body style and see that that is also set to 12. So changing the base style will not change the body style here. But the majority of my content needs to be smallish. So the first thing I'm going to do in the body style is set it to no change. Nothing changes at that point. But now, any changes I make to the size of the text in the base style will ripple through to the body style. So in my font size, 8's a bit small, isn't it? I said don't use 8. Right, ours is actually 10.5, but I'll make it 10. And you can see that that has made a difference. Right, the next thing I would probably do, our reflection doesn't have a name. It just says reflection at the top. And I created 300 words that fit beautifully. So that is what I would do with that. That means that this frame that's linking to this second frame, it doesn't now need the second frame. That does not mean that it's a good idea to just leave it there and put the rest of the content in it. This reflection is a standalone piece. It is either going to fit in there or it's not. And if I have this overflowing, things will move when I start adding other content. So if I don't need that frame, I'm just going to delete the frame and it's gone. Right, so I've got my reflection in here. Now our reflection is on the left-hand side there, but I'm going to move it. I'm moving it because we don't have a table of contents, but you might. So I'm going to show you how to create it. So I will put the reflection over on this side. The other thing that we have here is our today's Mass, which is the Psalm response and the Gospel acclamation. So I'm copying that from my text file. And now I'm going to add another text box here. Let's put that in there and paste the contents. Now, it has formatted that as a heading 2. Why? Well, I said it would keep the same. And in here, we don't have a heading 2. We deleted it. But the last text we touched was a heading 2. Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? But I'm going to select the whole lot and make that body text. And let's have a look at it. Right. And this is overflowing as well. We've got all kinds of things going on here. This would say to me, yes, I copied this from our newsletter. And you can see the problems that I've got already, which I should have noticed in the text file. Right, to make this work, our parish secretary has put hard returns at the end of every line. Don't do that. Words will be had. But if I look in the text file, you can see the problem. Here, to make it look right, she's put a hard return in. Right, you don't need to do that. You just need to know how it works properly. So that can be on one line. And down here, that can be on one line. If you actually do want things separately, like the Alleluia, that's absolutely fine. But these two lines didn't need that. So I'll recopy that. Reason that's causing a problem in here is it's treating this line as separate from this line, and that's why we've got a huge gap. So before you go any further, you're going to need to triage your content, aren't you? Now, that does look better because these are now together. I will now need some styles for this. I would need a style that is today's Mass. Then I would need a style that is the Psalm. And then I would need the same style for the Gospel acclamation. And the whole thing needs to be centered. So at this point, I don't have styles that are useful for that. It's got the body style. But you've got two options. You can either create the styles like I demonstrated last week, or you can style this text up and then make the styles later, which is what I'm going to do. So what I would do with this is the whole thing needs to be centered. This at the top would need to be bigger, so let's make that bigger. Let's make that bold. The Psalm also needs to be bold. The Gospel acclamation needs to be bold. So make sure that the whole thing is selected. And there. And that is okay. Now, our parish secretary is trying to get this centred by pressing enter. And it's not needed, is it? Because once it's centred, so she's putting spaces at the beginning, and then she's pressing enter to get it centred. But you don't do that. This style will centre it for you when you've created it. Simple as that. So our Psalm needs to be in bold, and now we're pretty much good to go. The spacing's probably a little bit too much, but as I said, this isn't about styles, it's about how to use this. So I would create a style for this one here, which is next week's, no, this is today's Mass. So today's Mass heading. Now we already have a heading 1 and we have a heading 2, but they're far too big. So it probably is a good idea to make a new style, which is a heading. So put it under H for heading, and then say what it is, which is today's Mass. And then I know exactly what it is, and OK. That way, I can then reapply it. Now, I don't need that style anywhere else, but I do need this. Right, so I'm going to make another style there. This time, it needs to be, I've got that heading on under body, haven't I? Never mind where it's gone. Right, it will look correct, but this one is going to be a heading. It is today's mass, but this is a subheading. So I'm going to put sub at the end so we know it's a subheading. Right, I think I've gone a little bit wrong with the size, but it'll do. Right, that is now applied to this. It is not applied to this. So although the text looks the same, the style isn't applied. And that is not good. I need that applied. So I will select that and apply it just by clicking it. And that is it. It's applied. I did go wrong with the size. I've got this at 10.1. Very simple to change that. Just go into it, choose 10. OK, both of them will update. What I then do with this is scoot it down so we've got it like that. I think ours sits towards the bottom. And it's a text frame. So just like we had a panel for the table, we also in here have panels for the text. And one of them is the text frame. So if I bring that up, it's opened it off screen because I have it off screen, but I will bring it on screen so we can see it. We can now format this because unlike the front cover where we wanted a massive gap, this one doesn't need a massive gap. It does need a little bit of a gap. But what we can do in here is, again, we've got groups, so fold them all up if it's overwhelming. Right, this one will enable us to use a fill, but also apply a stroke. So if I wanted a black stroke on that, it probably does need to be a little bit thicker than that. So we can see it like that. Excellent. But look at the problem with that. We've now got a problem in terms of the layout of it. So we can go in here with our columns. This is where we would have multiple columns. And we can format this. So these are our insets. So we don't need columns or column rules or anything like that. Insets in the text frame panel, don't they look identical to the table ones which were here? And they work in exactly the same way. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that the link is on and then make sure we've got at least 2 millimeters breathing room. And now you don't have to, because the alternative was, if you think about our front cover, get that out of the way. If we move the back, the frame at the back, we're going to need to move the table as well. This one is all self-contained, right? We move that, the whole thing moves with it. You should be seeing, though, that we've got the eyeball and the triangle. And that is saying that because you put a border on it and then you put an inset on it, it needs to be a little bit bigger. So it's always worthwhile keeping your eye on that to make sure it doesn't go red at the side. Now, that is something that you might want to put in if you're doing a Christmas newsletter and you've got like readings for 5 masses. That is something that you might want to make an asset of, and then you can just drag and drop it on. If I wanted to do that, I would drag it up here. Today's mass, it might not say that because it might be for different masses. So I would leave it saying mass. Then we've got the psalm, but this time I'm just going to put the word psalm. And in here, because the psalm will be different, the gospel acclamation will be different. Right, I will put a gospel in there. And then that is ready to be made into a little template, and a little template in Affinity is an asset. So this is what the assets panel looks like. Again, all your panels are available from within here. I just happen to have that one showing. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to create a new category, which I will call our parishes. There we go. There's the first set of assets. With this selected, it is good practice to go into here and tell it what it is. All right, and what it is today's mass, but I'm going to put mass. You could put mass responses, whatever you want. The reason I'm naming it is because I'm about to add this to my assets panel and I need to know what it is. So clicking on the drop down there, you've got the option to add from selection. Good job I named it because you can't see it. Right, you can do things with that. You can in here change the background. You can have a light background if all of your assets are dark. That just looks ugly as far as I'm concerned in the entire interface. Turning the entire interface light, absolutely fine, but we can't do that. But we do have an option to do that in here. But I have this showing up here, right? I have that showing as a list. If I didn't have it showing as a list and it was dark, then nobody would be seeing anything. So if I set in the, then is there anything there? So it is handy with the lack of a light interface to change that to show as a list. And then it doesn't matter whether you can see the thumbnail or not. Right, that means that in here, let me delete the whole thing. Right, if I want to add another one of these, I drag and drop and we're good to go. Right, so we've got reflection content. We've got today's masses content. I'm going to leave that bit up there. I'm going to need to come back to that. Right, the next thing I'm going to do in here is our news items. Now, our news items, I have in another text file. What I would need to do with our news items is triage them again. So, because these are coming in via email, they're coming from all over the place. So I have tidied these up to start with. These are the news items. Each one is separated. Again, I will make it so you can see the markdown with one of these headings, which is now orange. So this is just indicating to me it's a heading. That's it. And that needs to go in there and all be formatted. Right, so what I'm going to do with it, I need somewhere to put it. And at the moment, there's no text frame there. Now, I know that this is going to take at least 2 page spread, possibly 3, depends. Notice that what I've got here is formatted as a heading 2 with a stroke on it. We don't want any of that, do we? No. So make sure that you convert that back to body and you lose the stroke on it. Now, the stroke is not coming where you might think it's coming from, in the stroke panel. So I get this question a lot. Just a minute, it's got no stroke and yet there's a stroke. I can see the stroke. Why have I got a stroke? Right, because the last one that you formatted, which was this, had a stroke applied via the text frame. Didn't have a fill, but it had a stroke 2.5. That does not ripple through to this stroke panel. So if you are scratching your head and thinking what is going on, that's what's going on. So what I would do in there is turn that off. So have I got it selected? I do. Turn it off. And now that should work. Notice that something else has happened though, that's far more subtle. When we put the text in any other frame, it started bang up to the left-hand side. But look what this is doing. There's a gap. Where's that coming from? Well, that also is coming from the text frame, isn't it? Because we added this, we added an inset of 2. And normally that is set to 0.1. So if you want consistency, you would need to go in and do that, and then that would move your insertion point. You may well miss that. Oh, but somebody who's reading it won't miss it, and you'll hear all about it in stereo. Trust me on that. Been there, done that, got the scars. So there's the frame. What I'm going to do now is paste the content in. And I clearly haven't copied it yet, have I? Right, let's go back over there and paste. Right, I said it was going to take at least 2 pages in our spread. You'll notice though that over here there wasn't a frame, so I'm going to need to draw another frame out. Then I'm going to need to go back to the first one and link the 2 frames together. I still here have an overflow. So I'm going to need another frame down here to flow that one into. So I'm clicking there and I'm clicking in here. And it finishes with the Parish Council. Right, so it's taking at the minute 2 and a bit pages. Right, things to think about in relation to that. If you've been with me before, you may know the trick of auto-flowing by holding the Shift key down. Why didn't I do that? I didn't do that because I've already set this up. So when you're working with a newsletter or a magazine, if I'd have said, make me as many pages as you need to fit this content, now it won't print properly, will it? Because now I've got 9 pages and it won't work. So I did it manually because I knew there wasn't that much text and I need to rigidly stick to these 8 pages. I do not need random pages appearing. Right, what I do need to do in here now is to format all of this. So I have shown you how you could quickly do that. It might be a little bit too much if you've never done that before. but it's not that difficult. Everything that has a double hash sign at the beginning should be a heading 2. Obviously, I can just click in the line and apply a heading 2. And we now have it applied. Simple as that. And then I could take away these. But there's a lot of them. So purely for speed, I'm going to say find hash sign, followed by a space. And replace it with a paragraph style, which is heading 2. You can't really go wrong with this because when you hit find, it will show you and you can see, yep, all of those have got the heading 2, and then replace it. That automatically formats it. And then I can go in there and say reset the formatting, and now go and find those hashes and replace them with nothing. In other words, delete them, and they're all deleted. Now, format-wise, this still isn't looking great because the heading 2 could do with a little bit of help, couldn't it? So I can go in and start editing this. We're now getting into the weeds of what you want your newsletter to look like, which is completely up to you. All I'm doing here is showing you principle. So I'm changing that. I think we had 10 points, didn't we? So I could take that down to 11 and it would look fine. I'd also, for this, need to adjust the spacing because I don't want much spacing after it. So in my spacing after, if I just say 1 point or 2 points, it pulls it back and it makes it look neater. We can also see which heading belongs with which news item. So that is good enough for a demonstration. And this is a demonstration. So I'm going to save at that point, just in case. Right, what do we need to do next? Let me have a look. Right, I'm going to add a couple of images to enhance these stories. Right, images. Simple images are absolutely fine. So I have 2 images to illustrate those stories that are very straightforward. So I'll show you that, but then I'll show you what happens when things get tough. And the tough need to get going. So I have here 2 images, simple images, there we go. One is for the jumble sale story, and the other is for the day out that the Silver Surfing Brigade are having. Here you go, the Silver Sparks. Right. When you're laying these out, start at the beginning. Because if you start down here and then you go back to the beginning, things will go wrong. Would you like to see things go wrong? Of course you would. Right, what I'm going to do is put a placeholder in for the image. And this here is the Over 60s Club. That's where the image needs to be. So I will put a placeholder for my image there. I think it's square. So what I can do over here is put 50-50, make sure that that stays square and put it in place like that. Technically now when I scale it, right, so I've got it in this last column, but if I put an image in there, you're not going to be able to read the text. But I have an image, so let's do it anyway. So here is the Silver Sparks logo. Right, what I can do with that is make it a little bit bigger so it fits the space we've got there, and move it down so I'm not losing the top, just like that. But you can see the problem. It's sitting over the top of the text. What we need to do is alter the wrap on this image. And I'm going to do that by opening up the wrap settings, which is a little dialog box, which is that one. And at the moment, this image has no wrap on it. Now, these are the wrap options you've got. Jump is not good in this scenario because it pushes the text completely out of the way. Not what we want. You could make it square. You could make it tight. For this image, I think it does make a slight difference. That's what happens if it's square. The text pushes towards the left and you can now see the logo here. Right, if we go for tight, it doesn't make a difference, but with some images it does. It depends. So you would have to be careful with that. I would make that one square. You can also set up a distance from the text. So at the minute it's 1.1. But you could change that. Again, you've got that little lock icon, the little chain. And look what happens as you start taking this up. You're pushing the text further and further away from it. But in our circumstance, 1 or 1.1 is probably absolutely fine. So that is the first thing. Now, why did that go hideously wrong? You're saying that's not gone hideously wrong? No, but it will do. Right. I also need to put the image in for the jumble sale. So let's go and get another picture frame and put that up there. Again, I think that was square. So we'll make it about that size. And then I need to put the image in it. So I have a JPEG of the jumble sale to drag and drop into there. Still not catastrophic at this point, is it? No, but this image that we've just added is sitting over the top of the text. So we need to bring back the wrap and we need to put a wrap on it. Now it's catastrophic because what's happened is this image is no longer lined up with this. Now I might choose with this image to make that actually quite a bit bigger. Maybe fill 2 columns with it. In which case, this is now, well, where's the story? That doesn't fit with the story. Okay, so that's the problem. Let's undo and go back to that point. Right, what we can do is say to this image, whatever happens with the text, move with it. Now, how we do that is we open a thing called pinning. And that's opened on the other monitor. Oh, this is fun, isn't it? Trying to find the interface. Right, this is the pinning panel, which will enable us to pin this image to anywhere we choose. So we have this pin option, and you can see it's linked it stuck a pin in there. Literally, it stuck a pin in it. That is the pin. But I don't want it linking to the bottom of there. I want it linking to the heading of this story. And that is all there is to pinning. Now, you've got all of these options in terms of the offset and where it moves to and all the rest of it, but we can just ignore that. What we need to know is if we go back and we put that image back, the jumble sale image, that we had taking up an almighty amount of space with a text wrap on it. So I'll put the image in first so we can see it. Then I will apply the text wrap, which is in the text wrap dialog. So let's go square on that. Look what happened there. This image moved with the text. That's exactly what you want. I've seen so many times that images have been put in and then more text has been put in and the image is 3 pages back. That will always keep it with it. So that's pinning. Now, what I would do with this, although this is the first story, wouldn't be the first time another story's come in, would it? So we might as well pin this image to the jumble sale title as well. So with the pinning panel and the image selected, hit the pin. It has pinned it up there, which isn't bad actually. I would just put it to the end of the line. I don't like things pinned to the middle. And then what would happen is if you added more content up here, so if I just went there, another story, and we follow that with a body text, and we just put something in, you see what's happening? It's moving with it. And of course, so is the silver sparks. That's moving with it as well. So with magazines, newsletters, that is so important to keep those together. Now, they, believe it or not, are simple images, completely simple images. If we wanted to work with more complicated images, let's have a look what we do with tougher images. Right, again, I'm going to save that at that point. Tougher images. Right, this is genuine. I did not do this for artistic license or impression. This was genuine. So I hope you can imagine my horror. This was an image. This was the front cover of the newsletter that I edit this week. In case you're wondering, it's the Gospel according to Matthew. Chapter 5, verses 3 to 6. Yeah. My first thought was, well, this is going to take some work. Now, it did need multiple passes, but you've got to remember that if you have full editorial control, you can do what you like. So you could find another image. You could make an image, but it would be different than that. No. I have an acid test here. When I edit an image, it has to pass the priest test, which is, did he notice? And if the answer to that is no, awesome. He wouldn't even notice whether you could read it or not. Seriously. But he'd notice if the colour was different. So I needed to edit that and make it look better. Right, it did need multiple passes, but this was the final result. Can we read that one at all? Yes. That's after a 2-step process and a couple of light edits. But I think you can agree there. Now, if you look at that, you should see there's some differences as well. Are the meek is not in the same place. The text is moved up and it's not taking as much room because it's a little bit wider. And the are the meek is on the sky above the horizon, not below it. But you know what? Close enough. And it passed the priest test. You didn't notice, which is great. So step 1 for that, believe it or not, was AI. I just slung the image in AI and I said to it, please upscale and sharpen the image for clarity only. Do not change the content, colour, layout or composition. It's a short but very powerful prompt that got me that far. That was the result. It got us there. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you may have, with that one, noticed a couple of problems because it did need 2 manual edits making to it. There was a couple of tiny things. Can you spot what was needed? One I saw straight away because I thought, what on earth is that? The other one, no, I had to look very carefully. But the word kingdom, it's got either a D in it. Well, it's not a G. Let's put it like that. It's kingdom. And that little star shape at the bottom, I thought, what on earth's that? And it was the word for, but written on a skew. So I needed to edit that image. Now, if you're using something like Microsoft Publisher, it's not got much in the way of photo editing capabilities. But Affinity has, and I was able to do the whole job in Affinity. So let's go and have a look at that. That's why I said we'd be going back to the front page. The image needs to go in there. So the image I was working with was the tougher image. I do believe it is this one. Please be this one. Excellent. So I'm going to drag and drop that in there. Now I could in here make that a little bit bigger, make it even easier to read that and move it into place. But ultimately what I needed to do was fix that bit. So this is a G. And down here, make sure that that disappears and is replaced with the word for. So that's what I need to do with it. Right. At the moment, I am in Layout View, which is akin to Publisher, Affinity Publisher. But Pixel View is better for this. So this is my picture frame, and inside my picture frame, I have my image. I don't want to edit that image, just in case I manage to make it worse. Wouldn't be the first time. So what I'm going to do is put in there a layer that I call repairs. And that's where my repairs are going to go. Right. The text will go on separate, but I do need to make 2 repairs in here. The first one is to get rid of this weird shape. I don't want that. So I'm going to use a tool over here, which is the in-painting brush. You can see I've got it very tiny. I can make that a little bit bigger. And all I need to do is paint over the top of it. So I've got enough of the background included. So there's like a little frame on that. Right? I've got enough of the background that it knows what I'm trying to get rid of. When I let go, it's repaired it. That's absolutely fine. I might get rid of that bit as well. That has given me blank space to work on. But it is non-destructive editing because look, if I do that, it comes back. It's contained on its own layer. Now I could, I didn't, but you could. Some of these are clearly stars, but these look like dust. You could get rid of those literally just by clicking on them as well, if you chose. I did not, left it alone. Right, the next thing I need to do is this kingdom up here. That's a little bit trickier. What you need to think about with this is I haven't got the font because it's not editable. You can see it's pixels. Right, so the first thing is, okay, is there a G anywhere else? Is there a G that I can copy? Cheat. Right, no, there wouldn't be, would there? Right, so that's out the question. So how can I make that into a G? Right, the easiest way to do that is to edit what we've got. Right, so the first thing I need to do is probably lose this bit here. Just lose that. And you have seen that with the in-painting brush, I could maybe just paint over the top of it. Well, that didn't work, did it? Right, that's not going to work too well because it's too close to the one next to it to be able to effectively do that. But you have another tool, which is the stamp tool. The difference between the two is the inpainting tool is saying, it's all right, I've got this, leave it to me, which is sometimes good and sometimes not so good. The stamp tool says, okay, over to you, you decide what to do with it. So I'm going to take this bit here. In fact, I could do it very tiny if I did it here. I'm holding the Option key down and sampling there. And as I move across, you can see it's taking that bit where the cross is and it's filling it in. So now I'm splitting that and I can go up a bit, probably to about there, about there, I think. And then just mix it up a bit so you're tidying that up. I think I've gone a little bit too far. I think I could take it to there. So I've got a little bit more of that. Now, at least I've split it, but it doesn't look like a G because there would need to be like a little arm there. So where do I get that from? Well, let's have a look. What's got a little arm? Oh, look at that E. So if I hold my Option key there and click, and I come across to here, all I need to do is start drawing by clicking and bringing that in so it looks like a G. And that looks pretty much like a G. If I need a little bit more, if this is starting to look a bit soft underneath, I can just select somewhere else and fill that in with another bit from there. And now we've got a G. That's softer than my original, but it'll do. It's a demo. Right, so we fixed that. We still have an issue, which is I've got this down here. I've got space to put the word for, but I haven't got the word for. So I'm going to fold that up as the repairs in my pixel view. I can do this in either the layout view or I could do it in vector view. It wouldn't matter. But what I'm going to do in here is add some artistic text. Like that. And it is the word for. And we can just about see that. Let's get it down there. And what on earth has it done with it? Right, I need that above there so we can see it. I also need that to be a particular font. Now, what did I use? Big Caslin. That was what I used. So, I've typed the word for. So far, so good. Apart from the fact it's the wrong colour because it's going to sit on here. So, first thing I need to do so I can see it, let's make it this colour. It was obviously a lot smaller, but it was also on a skew. So, what do I do to make that happen? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of it just in case it all goes hideously wrong. But I'm confident it won't, she said. I'm going to go into here and I'm going to convert this to curves. It's not going to be editable text anymore. I'm going to convert it to curves. That means I can manipulate it more. So what I can actually do in my pixels is add a filter layer to that, where I can distort it and change the perspective. Right, what does that mean? It means I can do that, stretching it up there, stretch it up there, keeping that in a line with it. And what's happening is it's starting to look like the original, although you couldn't really see the original too well, could you? But it's that there, and I would be looking to place it in here. Obviously, it's far too big. But I can scoot it down at this point and move it into place. And that is about what it looked like. Now, obviously, it's a lot sharper. If that was a problem, it being sharp, to be honest, the size of this, you're not going to notice. But if it were, you can fix that as well. You just need to select it. And I'll zoom in so you can see it happening. Apply an effect to it of blur. So turn the blur on and then start moving it slightly. And you can see, well, you can have it very blurred. I wouldn't do that. Now he's cropping it. Why are you cropping it? Don't be awkward. Oh, that's not good, is it? Right, I don't think, no, that's just going to make it bigger. I didn't apply the radius when I did this in rehearsals. The Gaussian blur. Interesting. Right, I'll have to have a look at that, but you could if you wanted. There are other ways that you can do that. But we've got the text in the right place and now everything is reading properly. And at that point, what I would do with this, I don't need the backup that I made, but this and the picture together I would put in a group. And that way I'm not moving one bit without the other. If I move that, I want the whole thing to move, not just part of it. Okay, so we've sorted that image out. Now, as an aside with tougher images, the prompt that I use to create that clear version of that is in the resources. But I didn't leave it there. All right, there is a way to effectively use AI for images, because AI isn't necessarily evil. It depends on how you use it. Now, this situation is, what if you don't even have a very poor quality starting image? I did. I looked at that and I thought, what's that supposed to say? But what if you don't even have that? Well, you might be tempted to use a prompt something like this. Make me an image for my newsletter. It's Matthew 5:3-6. Now that is going to generate what we call AI slop. Because with AI, it's garbage in, garbage out. And that is not a great prompt. A poor prompt will give you a poor image. And that is what it created. You might look at it and think, well, it's not bad. Well, no. But it's not a church either. It's a church hall. When you look at the text, the welcome home and join us Sundays at 10 is there, but our mass is 9:30, not 10. I didn't tell it 10. It's made it up. It's also spelt Sunday with an E further down. So that is about what you can expect from a poor prompt. Now, with a better prompt, it will give you a much better output. But what does a better prompt look like? That is a better prompt. As you can see, it's epic. It goes on and on and on. The good news is it's repurposable. You could take that prompt and just change the chapter and verse, and it would give you a really good image. That prompt gave me that. That was exactly what I described, and that was what it gave me. Now, that prompt, obviously, it's huge. It is epic. It is contained in the church newsletter resources that I will give you the link for at the end. You can take it and you can change it. I mean, obviously you can change the Bible verse that it's coming from, but if you are using a different newsletter, it's not a church newsletter at all, then just change the prompt and you will get images that you are able to use. Now, your next question is going to be, yes, but which AI did you use? It doesn't matter. Up to a point. There's only one thing to remember, which is Claude doesn't do images. But ChatGPT does, and Gemini Nano Banana does. But Claude tends to be text only. Now, in my research, it said, oh, yeah, Claude is amazing. Claude can take a bitmap image and make you an SVG of it, which is vector. I thought, can it really? Okay, there you go. Oh, it didn't end well. So leave Claude alone when it comes to images. Right, let's move on and look at working with tables. This is the last bit of the newsletter that we're going to put in there. This is going to be fun. I've had Mike on this most of the weekend as well. We've had fun, haven't we? Right, this is the mass table. Now, our mass table is doubly more complex than that. We have two churches. The masses are at different times, on account of the fact that the priest hasn't yet managed to be in two places at once, but he's working on it. So, ours is more complicated, but an average church mass timetable would look like that. I have changed the names to protect the innocent. Obviously, we can't have real names in there, so I've made some up. Can you tell? Can you tell? Penelope Pitstop was my favourite. Now, what I'm going to show you is the 3 ways that don't work and the only way that does. You're going to need to know that, because I guarantee by the time you reach number 3, you'll have given up. And there's no need to give up. It can work. So let's have a look at that. Right, the mass table in our church goes at the back here. Ours is sideways because we have 2. But this is going to be easier, she said. Now, what I've got here is a source for the data. Now, again, it doesn't matter if it's a church newsletter or not. It really doesn't. What I've got here is an Excel table. There it is. It's all lovely and formatted. And I, a lot of the time, get people saying, I just want to put that in Affinity. Yeah, good luck with that. But, you know, the help file says you can do it. And of course it does. Guess what? It's lying. But we'll give it a go. So that is the table. Now, things to notice. It's formatted. It's Arial 10. It's bold. We have a background colour on some of the cells. This indicates the break between this week and the following week. As does, this is the third Sunday in ordinary time at this point. We've got merged cells. These two cells are merged. These two cells are merged because we have two masses on a Sunday. This is merged and centred, and so is this, as is row 6 and row 12. So it's easy to do that in Excel, and you could create this entire table in Affinity if you chose to. But a lot of people already have this in Excel and they want to bring it in. It's something I've never demonstrated, so I thought I'd demonstrate it. Right, you select it and you copy it, because we all know we can copy and paste, don't we? So all we need to do then is get into Affinity and paste it. And it looks fine, doesn't it? We need to get it in the right place. So we'll just move it, shall we? Right, we'll just move it. Oh, good grief. What? What's it doing? Oh, no. Right, it's not a table. In fact, it's worse than that. Each of these individual lines. What is it thinking? Now, I think, it knows it's coming from Excel. Please make me a table. No. Now, this bit, you might think, well, hang on a minute. All right, the background's not there, but this is a table, isn't it? Well, let's move it out of the way and let's get rid of all these lines. And then let's bring this back in. Right, is that a table that I could format? Would that work? Well, let's have a look what's in here. It's a group. A group of what? Well, let's have a look. Oh, no. Each individual bit is artistic text. Good luck editing this. No. No, no, no. It might look all right, but just imagine trying to get borders around that lot. So no, that's not going to work. So that is number 1. Don't do it that way. It doesn't work. Right. Number 2. The help file says, unhelpfully, that if you make a table like that and you click in the top cell and paste, it will paste it in for you. I thought, go on then, I'll bite. Yeah, all into one cell. No, that isn't going to work either. So there's the second way that doesn't work. Right, surely there's some good news here. Well, if you add a table, and it doesn't matter, give or take, you can make the table bigger than you need, but I wouldn't if I were you. It's just not necessary. Right, if you select the entire table, right, instead of just clicking in the top cell and paste, ooh, we're getting somewhere. Right, it is a table. Things are in reasonably the right place. If we put that in place and we stretch it, well, let's just say it's not as bad as it could be, but it's not great either. These aren't centred. There's no background colour on them. There's no merge and centre on them. And these dates that were all together in one cell are now in 2 cells. So good, but no T-shirt. You'd have as much manual formatting to do with that as you would if you just typed the thing in the first place. So that doesn't work either. This point, I wasn't pleased. I was not pleased. Right, but let's go back to Excel. All right, that's what we're working with. Right, what we actually want is that table bringing in looking like that, giving me 0 work to do. That would be grand. Now, I have in here 2 sheets. This is my formatted table. This is my raw data. So that was what I brought in, and then I formatted it so it looked perfect. Right, I want to bring that in. So I'm going to close Excel. Here's the trick. Here is the trick. Right, if I go into here, File, Place. Now, we've used File Place before, but we've been placing PDFs or other Affinity files. But if we go into here and we have our mass table from Excel, which is our Excel file, and we open that, it opens up the Place panel, which you only see when you are about to place something. And the 2 things that it has listed, which you can click to select one or the other, are the tabs from your Excel file. So this is your mass table, and that was the raw data. So the mass table is the name of the file, and the bit in brackets is the name of the sheet within it. I only want to place this. So when I move over here, you can see I've got a totally different mouse pointer. What that is doing is saying if you click here, you will place the formatted sheet at this point. So let's click. Okay. Now I don't want to place this one at all. So if I go and just choose the Move tool, the Place panel vanishes and I'm left with my table. Excellent. Right, let's put this in place and get it scaled. Oh, this looks much better. It's not perfect, but it's almost there. Right, first thing I'm going to do. Right, it hasn't brought in with it any of the borders, the stroke on the edges that we need, the borders of the table. But we can select the whole lot, and remember our table panel. We had our table panel and our text frame. This is our table panel, and what we can do with this is say, okay, in the fill and stroke, I want you to take all of the borders and I want you to make them, let's have a greyish colour, palish grey, and I want them to be 0.5. So get it back to 0.5 and we're done. So as I click this background, you can see we now have borders on there. Right, we've now created another problem, which is the insets need adjusting. So select the whole lot again. And in our insets, let's set those to 2mm. That will push them in from the border. Let's have a look at it now. Excellent. Right, I personally would make a couple of changes to this, which is I would take this and scoot it up. Now look what happens when I do. This moves at the bottom, so it then becomes like trying to make it correct, but that's not too bad. Right, so I've made that one a little bit smaller. I think that only needs one more thing, which it would be nice if it had a border on it. So select the whole table, and this time it's not the stroke and fill, although you could, because if you chose this one, this is the outside one, but you could also do this as part of a frame. So you could say up there, we'll have it a little bit darker, so we'll have that colour. And instead of it being 0.2, we will take that up so a level that we can see it, like that. But notice that we're getting a problem at this stage. The problem that we're getting as I click away is that these are overlapping it. So while that might be one way to do it, it isn't the way that I would do it. But a lot of people head for the frame. But what you could do is forget the frame, just choose the outside cells, choose a colour, and then choose a width for it. And as you bring that in, you can see that now we don't have that table looking odd in terms of the borders overlapping things or the headings overlapping things. So I think 2.5 is probably about right for that, and we have a perfect table. From Excel, no less. But we've also learnt 3 ways that don't work. We're at the point that we've learnt the one way that does. Okay. So that's our table sorted. So copy and paste doesn't work. Unless you want a complete mess in your document. Pasting into the top left cell, which is what the help file says to do, doesn't work. Unless you want the whole contents of the table in one cell. Pasting into the whole table looks suspiciously like it works, but it doesn't. Go for the file place option every single time. Right, I am now going to do the table of contents. So we'll have a look at the table of contents versus a selective table of contents, no less. Right, so what I'm going to do, this gap that I left, if I'm going to do a table of contents, I need to have done one thing already. And the one thing that I needed to have done is use text styles, which I did. All of these news items were level 2s, remember? So I can go in here and add a text frame. And notice I've got the grey border on it that I don't want on it. Where was that coming from? Was it our text column? Well, it's not the stroke, is it? No, it's not up there. So I'll have to go and get the text frame panel. There's our text frame, and it has remembered that. That's where it's coming from. So I need to go into there and say, oh no, you don't. Because that just needs to be a standard text frame that I would then put contents in and insert a table of contents. which is relatively straightforward. You can insert a table of contents from up here, which is table of contents, insert. You can also manage the whole table of contents with a table of contents panel. So what I'm going to do with that, you can add one from there, or you can use the menu, doesn't matter. So I'll add that in there. And notice it has done magic things. We've got far too much, and it's not formatted in the correct way. It starts off with the reflection, which is here under heading 1. These are our stories, our heading 2s. Right, so that would be our table of contents. But this table of contents panel enables us to be much more precise. I don't actually want the heading 1s listed. I want these to be news items. So we've said contents, but actually these are news items. So we could say that. And now it's listing the news items and only the news items that are on these 3 pages, these 2 and the following page. And we could then, you can put a heading 1 in if you want, but I'm just looking for the news items. Now, in here, I think it would probably be better to be able to format this in a different way. Now, a lot of people go in and they format the table of contents. Don't do that. On pain of death, do not do that. Because as soon as you update it, you'll lose all your formatting. So the correct way to do it is to use text styles. Because magic happens when you are inside a table of contents, which is, you can see you now have a top 1 entry, a heading 1 and a heading 2. These only appear when that table of contents is active. If I was in the reflection, notice no table of contents styles in here, none. So you need to be inside the table of contents. This is going to determine, so we're going to edit that, what that looks like. So we'll get it side by side so we can see it. Right, one thing we want is tab stops to the right, which we've got. Now that is, the numbers are showing to the right, ballpark. This one's not because it's taking too much room, but we will fix that. So we already have these right aligned, but your eye is like trying to go across and you're losing it because you need the dot leaders. And at the moment that's set to none, but you could put a dot leader in and that is what would format this. Now this is the kind of thing that people do manually. And then when they refresh, the whole lot goes and they're not happy. Right, let's go back to the character up here. We have the font family, etc. At the moment, this is the same as whatever this is based on. What's it based on? It's based on table of contents entry. Okay, so that means that the heading 1 and the heading 2 would be the same size if it's coming from there, which it is. So you've got a choice. You can either change it in here, which is the heading 2 level, or you can edit it at the top 1 entry level. It's totally up to you. We will do it in here purely because this is open and we'll do it for speed. So in our font in here, where we've got the size, we will make that smaller. We'll make it 9 points, and that will mean that it fixes our number issue. Even when this wraps round, it still works because the dot leaders are coming from the second part of it. And that is how we make a table of contents and how we customize that without risking the fact we'll lose it. Prove the point that we do not lose it. If I'm in the table of contents and the table of contents panel and I refresh, update the table of contents, I do not lose the format. So we've done that. That is a full table of contents. How would you make a selective table of contents? So some of the content that we have here is important. You don't want people turning up for the changes to choir practice at the wrong time. So the choir practice story would be important. The first forgiveness and first communion would be important. Bingo night, probably less so. But we don't want to upset the silver sparks by not including theirs. So basically what I'd like to do is be selective in terms of what I include. But it's automatic. It's based on the table of contents styles. It's based on the fact that it's a heading 2. So what do? Well, I go to my page And I think, right, which were the important ones? And we said the over 60s outing, they get upset, if it's not in there. So that's a heading 2 at the moment. What I'm going to do is duplicate this. So instead of editing it, I will duplicate it. That will give me, unfortunately, a heading 3. That's not what I want. It's still a heading 2, right? But it's featured. I want to feature this in my table of contents. So I'm just going to duplicate it and rename it. That's it. Then what I need to do is format the ones in here that need to be featured with this style. So we've said the Silver Sparks is going to be featured. Notice it looks like nothing changed because heading 2 featured is an exact duplicate of heading 2. Right, what else was there? There was the first forgiveness that needs to be featured and the first communion needs to be featured. So all I'm doing is going through these. Choir practice needs to be featured, as probably does the parish council. So we'll feature those. Looks-wise, they look identical. If we go into our table of contents, are they there or not? Well, they are at the moment, but we'd need to update this to be absolutely certain. Oh dear. We've actually got the inverse of what we wanted. It's taken away the ones that we wanted featured. And that's because, when we click in it, that's because of what's happening in here. If it's formatted as today's Mass, we want it included. If it's formatted with that, we want it included. Right, well, we don't particularly want either of these. And our heading 2s are not what we want. So we'll take the tick out of that. Now we've got nothing in there. But if it's formatted as a featured item, we want that. So I've put that in there. Now notice at this point, it's going to need formatting because I formatted that at heading 2 level. So I would need to go in and edit this unless I'd done it a different way to start with, which was edit its parent style. But I didn't because I wanted customization. So let me go into here and edit it. And what I did was I changed the tab stops to have a tab leader. And I changed the size of the font. Was it 9? I've got no recollection at all. We'll make it 9. It looks fine at 9. And now we have important news items like that. And that could be put wherever we need it to be. So could we scoot that down to 1? We could. And then what we could do is put that over there. We could align that to the bottom. And then we have our important news items there. Why I've done that is nothing to stop you, if you choose, to have both. Right, you'll have somebody who'll want to read everything and read the print of it, and you'll have others that just want the important ones that are down here. So up here, I would do the same again. So I've got a text frame. To add a table of contents, it puts the whole lot in. What do I actually want in there? Well, I don't want this, I don't want this. The heading 2 featured I'd leave, and the heading 2 I'll leave, but I don't want the heading 1. And that leaves us with that. And then you would go in and you would format it. It's as simple as that. And that gives you customized output. Now, last thing I need to think about with this is what happens in post-production. Now, I've talked about print and digital distribution. Digital distribution became far more important. I don't think we even made a PDF version before COVID, but we certainly did at COVID. Everything had to change, including me editing recordings of masses that the priest did to an empty church. Oh, it was great fun, was COVID. So we need to print and we need digital distribution. Printing depends on how your printer is configured. And sadly, I can't really give you much in the way of guidance on that, other than the fact that you can print it. But it's going to depend on your printer. You do up here have the option to print. What that will do is it will give you a preview. You can see my printer here, which is a network printer. It is double-sided, but that is off. You'll notice it's printing one individual page in the middle of an A4 sheet. So we can now have the debate about whether it's A4 or A5 again. Clearly, it's going to depend on how I configure my printer locally to print. And that's going to depend on your printer driver. Now, the printer I've got is fairly standard domestic thing. It's like a small business thing. it's a black and white laser printer. That's it. The one we have at the church, it can sing and it can dance and it can cook your dinner and wash clothes for you. It's about the size of a bathroom, and it literally can fold, it can staple, you name it. The driver for that looks very different to mine. So if you're printing it yourself, you're going to need to set your printer up properly. That's all I can advise you with that. Digital distribution, on the other hand, I can control and give you some advice on. Right, you would need, if you want to create this as a PDF, to go to the export options. Export options in here, you have a collection of PDF options. Now, this is digital distribution. Therefore, choose one of the digital options. Either small size or high quality. I always go for high quality. I will show you why. But the reason that you're choosing digital as an output is that you're creating a PDF. And that PDF is going to be opened by people on their tablets, their phones and their computers. And wouldn't it be great if any links that were in it actually worked? And the only way to make sure that that happens is to make sure that the options are set correctly inside the options you have on the right-hand side here. So in here we have include hyperlinks and include bookmarks, and we want them to be linkable. You want to be able to tap or click and they will take you to the destination. And that is what you get if you choose digital. If you choose print, you can see these two are turned off. You can turn them on if you want, but heaven knows if the rest of that is organised correctly for digital output. So choose digital output. Then you would need to tell it what you want. Do you want spreads or do you want pages? Now, obviously, the document was created in terms of spreads. For printing, we want this to print correctly. But when we're distributing it digitally, do you want spreads? Now, if somebody's looking at it on a computer like mine, 32-inch screen, probably. But most people are going to be looking at it on a phone. It's just the fastest way. They get the email, they tap it, they open it. It's going to be more difficult for them to read it if it's in spreads. So I would choose at this point to say all pages. You do not have to change the document to be pages for this to work. You just change it during the output. Okay, so all pages. And we are good to go. So I will export that. We'll put it in the root of that folder. And you can see how fast that happened. And it made a PDF. Here's the files. So there is the PDF. And that is what that looks like. So we can see that the images have come through. It's not done the thing it did with the print where it was in the middle of an A4 page. That's because the paper in my printer is A4 and it would need a bit of help knowing what to do with it. And there is everything, and that would read beautifully on a phone, a tablet or a desktop. Right, thing to think about in terms of what we selected. Look what happens when I move over this. So I'll zoom in. When I'm over the text, I can select the text. When I'm over this, you can see it changes to a hand. These are clickable. There is the choir practice. It takes you straight to it. So this is worth doing. They can click there and get straight to the story that they want to get to. Now, at this stage, let's close that down. What we've got here is that's the document I'm working on, and that is the PDF. I am going to make a copy of that. And we're going to come back to that in a second. So, optimizing your PDF output. I've just said people are going to download it onto a phone. 99% of them probably will. They are not going to thank you if that is 20 meg. Wouldn't it be nice if it was small, really tiny? Right, you can do that one of two ways. You've got the hard way and the easy way. Now, the hard way is to tweak endlessly in Affinity by Canva. It's very much trial and error. The easy way, an inexpensive third-party application called PDF Optim. Now, that's what it looks like in the Mac App Store, but it is not just a Mac app. Don't think that. It works on Windows, it works on Mac, and it works on iOS. And it couldn't be easier to use it. It really couldn't. So I've made a copy of this at 2.7 meg. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to compress it. And how I'm going to do that is open it in PDF Optim, which I do using Raycast. That will send that file over to PDF Optim. And you can see this is 2.7 meg. This is 413K. And how different does it look? Not that different. The left-hand image is what you originally had in the PDF. The right-hand side is what this looks like or would look like when it was compressed. And there is very, very little difference. But you've compressed it by almost 85%. And there's our logo for the Silver Sparks. So that is what that would look like. All I have to do is hit export, and that's it. It's done. Back in here, there's the original 2.7 meg, and there is the new version 413K. Open that up, it looks identical. Particularly the text. The text is obviously vector. There will be a slight difference with the images, but nothing catastrophic. You can still see it there. And this one, this isn't a vector, this is pixel based, but it looks absolutely fine. And your downloads, it will help you in two ways. One, people will not be screaming about how long it takes to download it. And secondly, your bandwidth on your website will be forgiving. Because if I'd uploaded it, I would be using the original one. I'd be using 5 times the bandwidth on my website. And I don't want to do that, do I? Right, you may have noticed I had 2 more folders in there. I will preempt some of the questions, which is the mass table. Mass table from a numbers file. Can't be done. You would have to open the file, not directly. You would have to open the file in numbers and export it as an Excel format. And if you are using Google Sheets, you would have to do the same. Export it as an Excel format. Right, let's go in there then. So that was all that we did. We covered a lot, an awful lot. From pre-production considerations all the way through production to post-production and optimizing your output. As I said, Microsoft Publisher is coming end of life. I have a cohort-based training coming up shortly, which will have in it everything you need to know to switch from Microsoft Publisher to Affinity Publisher. The waitlist is open right now, and if you sign up to the waitlist, you will get the FAQ guide, which I think from memory is about 25 pages of all the things you need to know now that Publisher is coming to an end. So if you are a Publisher user or you have a friend who is a Microsoft Publisher user, please point them there. Right, bonus-wise. Right, I've been promising all the way through Church Newsletter Resources for Affinity, and that is where you can get it. That is the QR code. That is the link for it. What you will find in there is all the things that I've referenced today, and including the AI prompts. So the prompts that I use to generate that, first of all, to tidy up the image, to generate an image, is the long epic prompt, and that is in there as well. There is also a link in there because the prompt is that long, it would be difficult to copy from a PDF, and that's what the file is. It's PDF with all of the content in, including the stock images, the icons, you name it. But there is a link in there to a Notion page, and on the Notion page, you will be able to copy with one click the prompt, the epic prompt that will enable you to generate images. So do go and sign up for that. Everything else that I do on the channel is available on demand at youtube.com/ElaineGiles. We have our dedicated Affinity with Elaine playlist, which is growing exponentially. We started this, believe it or not, back in November with everything you need to know. We then did a layout. I have done data merge. We did calendars. When we did calendars, we also created church calendars, so definitely worth a watch. Create planner pages. We did planner pages. We also did 2 epics on photo books. I got a lovely comment on the advanced photo books. I must share that with Mike later. I'll share it with you guys next week. Then we did the trifold brochure and followed that up with scrapbooking before we took a detour with working with colour. Then we did a recipe layout. That was great fun. Live consumption of sausage rolls. Which reminds me, I'm thinking of maybe a sausage roll later, Mike. Last week's was Mastering Textiles, which you all seem to enjoy. And this one will be available on demand as soon as we have finished. There is still the like button down there if you would like to hit the like button. There is also the option to subscribe and get first notification with the notification bell of when I go live. Now, you can't leave a comment while we're live. It's just the way YouTube works. But you can do it as soon as we've finished. And what we do is we have an icon. And the icon this week is the praying hands. Now, I've always said that that's the praying hands. But apparently it has another name, which I can't remember. But have you noticed that could be known as doing like a high five? But I've always called it the praying hands. Let me know in the chat what you call it. And then leave the comment later. Right, obviously, church newsletters, not to everybody's taste. So, what have we got next time? Something fun. Yes, I thought we'd take a detour and do something fun, and we are. We are doing fun and games in Affinity by Canva. Now, we're back to Sunday at 3 o'clock next week. That gives me 8 days instead of 7 to prep. But then he only had 6 this week, so there you go. And it is all about fun and games. Literally, fun and games. So if you would like to be kept entertained with fun and games, that's exactly what we'll be doing. It's not just tips and tricks about Affinity. No. The data that I'll be creating is literally games and how to do it in Affinity. So don't miss that one next week. Right, thank you for being with us. It's been a long one, but we have done an entire newsletter, so there you go. And I'm hoping we've got lots of questions. Tell me we've got lots of questions, Mike. Excellent. You can find me on the socials, but if you want to be social, Blue Sky, because I'm not great on all the others, but there you go. And of course, you can sign up for my VIP newsletter. You will get first notification of everything that I do. So we are going into Q&A. Where you go, Mike? Questions?
Right, I'm going to start with one for me.
Oh.
Only because it's at the bottom of the list. From Karen. How do you save word tables to Excel? Copy and paste. It's the quickest way.
Does it work?
I've not tried it, but I think it does. You could save the Word page as a web page and then import it into Excel, but the Word page may have other stuff on it. So I think copy and paste the easiest way.
I think if you're copying and pasting between 2 apps from the same company, you probably stand a better chance.
Yeah. If I find a quicker way, I'll put it in the forum. Right, so that was that one. Right, back to the top. From Christian, when I place a text frame on a master page and switch to the page that master is applied to, I cannot enter text in that frame. Am I doing something wrong?
No, you should be able to do that. So let's get a new document. And we will create a master page. So there's the master page for it. We will put a text frame on it. So there's the text frame. We will position that and apply master A to page 1. And then in there, you should then be able to paste. So what have I got here? Must times, no. Yeah, let's paste that. So yeah, you should be able to paste that. It could be that you've locked it somewhere. So have you locked it on the master? You will notice in here, it's not very clear that you can do that. So if I take that away, you are literally looking for that flashing thing at the top. The crosses mean that you can't particularly move it at this point. It's not for moving, but you can certainly paste into it like that. So I would check it's not locked on the master. But yes, you can certainly put text frames on masters and add content to them. I didn't do that with this one, just to keep it straightforward, in terms of parish secretaries using it, rather than wondering why things are on masters and all that kind of stuff. But yes, you should be able to.
Right. Next question.
Mm-hmm.
This is from John Sampson. In Reflections, why use a TXT file? Why not use doc and paste special?
It didn't come from there originally, and I'm not one for bringing stuff in that's formatted, because if I do, my styles get confused. So here's a problem. Right, this file here has the base styles in it, and there's no styles even applied. So this is not the one I've been working on. This is the one I've just demonstrated the master pages on. Right, and I brought in text. Now, if I had a file, which I think I do have somewhere, well, I'll tell you what, we'll take it from this one. Right, so I've got text in here that's formatted. All right, so this has some styles already on it. So we'll just take that group there and I'll copy that. Go to this one And I will put a new page in it. We will, in here, put the text. And a weirdness has happened. At this point, it's too late. It's broken. Right, what's happened is my base style, now I've got base 1. That happened as soon as I pasted formatted text in. And the styles that I've got, my body 1 and my heading 3 are under 1. And all of this, the body and headings are under this one. Now I've got a job on my hands to try and fix it. And the more that I copy and paste, the more that happens. And I haven't got the time for it. Literally haven't got the time for all of that. So I'm adding a new page here and showing you that if what I paste in is their images, that's not what I'm looking for, content. Right, so if I paste this in and then format it, I know what I'm getting in terms of styles. So I've copied that, I'm pasting it in. Now you're thinking, yes, but that's not formatted. No, it's not. But it is this quick to format it. Apply the body style to it, but now I've got problems with my styles, but apply the body style to it and then do a quick search and replace and it's formatted. It depends whether you're going for what it looks like or how it works. And those two are mutually exclusive half the time. If we look at this, it looks absolutely fine. Will it work? Oh, your guess is as good as mine. Where did that heading 3 come from? I didn't create heading 3. Where's that come from? When I say it looks okay, it does look okay. Now try creating a table of contents for it. And it will go crazy. It won't know what to include. Does it include the 3? Does it include the 1, the 2? What does it include? You would have to go through and fix it. So the more you copy and paste from somewhere else, irrespective of how fabulous it looks and how fast it was, the wheels will come off at the point that you try and use the Affinity tools to help you make a table of contents. That is not going to work. The table of contents is going to have the wrong content in it because it can't make head nor tail of what you've done with the text styles. So I prefer to bring in text and format it in here. This thing drives me mad. Now, you can fix it, all right? You would have to go in and edit body 1. In fact, body 1 shouldn't even be there. So I'd have to delete body 1, but then I've no idea what the knock-on implications of that are. And this heading 3 certainly shouldn't be a heading 3, but even if it were, it shouldn't be based on base 1. Now, you can go in and you can edit it. And in the admin, the style option at the top to me is admin, right? What this is saying is I'm based on base 1, and I'm thinking, yeah, well, I'm about to delete that. So I will change it. That will jump up and now be under base, but I've still got problems that I've got content formatted as body 1 that shouldn't be formatted as body 1. Can I fix it? Yeah, really simple, but it's a pain in the neck. Right, I've got that story. It shouldn't be body 1, it should be body. Okay, I'll make it body. Right, now I'm coming down to here. Oh, that one needs to be body 1 as well. Right, it needs to be body. So I'm formatting it, but what I can't do is format the whole lot, because if I select the whole lot and say, right, let's just make that body. Now I've lost the headings. Now I've got to go through and apply the headings again. Well, why was that any faster? It's not. But in terms of what it looks like, oh, it looks fine. It will go wrong at the point you try any kind of automation that Affinity can give you, like table of contents and links and that kind of stuff. That is when it will go wrong. It will look fine, it just won't work. And then you'll be frustrated. So that's why I always use Markdown. What else have we got?
Another one from Christian. At the start you mentioned we have to consider the elderly and visually impaired.
Mm-hmm.
But the body text is, and it's just put PT. Is that not too small? So I don't know what the point size was, but that's the general gist of it.
We are fine with 10.5. We've tested it 10.5, and 10.5 is fine. Depending on your demographic, again, I mean, people tend to bring their glasses. If somebody hasn't brought their glasses, or they don't want to admit that they're going to need to wear glasses, you probably get complaints. We haven't had a complaint in a long time, touch wood, at 10.5. But that's just our audience. I would say we got an elderly contingent, haven't we?
Yeah.
So I think we'd have heard about it if they couldn't read it. But, your mileage may vary. It could be that they're used to text that's bigger or a different style of font, and they've just got different preferences. I mean, we could get a different priest and he wants a different font. Maybe I could sneak my front cover back in if that happened. But he's been here 20 years. I don't think he's moving. Okay.
Another one from Christian. When creating newsletter for laser and inkjet printers, most inkjets have a bottom margin of a number of millimeters, whilst lasers have a margin of whatever he's tried to type in, the numbers haven't come through, millimeters all around. How to solve so the newsletters look good on both?
If you want the same newsletter to look good on both, you're going to have a problem. You'd have to have two versions of it. One option might be to make the margins work for the laser printer, for the inkjet, so the bigger margin at the bottom. And then for the laser printed version, put something in the footer so it doesn't look like there's a huge gap. Maybe put like the date or something like that, or page numbers, just so it looks like it's got content, and that content isn't there on the other version. But you can't really do much about that. You can change the size of the page and you can change the size of the content, but it's a manual job then sorting out what's moved. So you don't really want to be moving it. I'd fill it with something else, even if it's just like a decorative line or something. And then it doesn't look like there's anything missing.
Okay, last question, unless there's any more that come in. Pete Lax says, is PDF Optim better than PDF Shrink?
I just like the way PDF Optim works. It also gives me the benefit that if somebody says, I want to do it on an iPad, it will work on an iPad, but it's completely up to you. I mean, these things, all PDF readers and editors, compressors, they all work in a similar way. It just depends on what features you're looking for. PDF Optim does everything that I've ever asked it to do. And I like the fact that I've got a side-by-side view. And I showed that very quickly today. You can tweak the life out of that if you want it smaller and make other changes to it. So you've got complete control. I just use the medium compression today. So it just depends on the app and your preference, really.
And that's it.
Is that all the questions we've got?
Yep.
After all of that, I was thinking there would be more questions. Surely you can think of a few more. Right. So do we have any comments then? If we've not got questions, have we got comments?
We had lots of nice comments.
Oh, that's nice.
And a snark from Peter Williamson.
Oh, what's Peter's problem?
Is there a school for parish secretaries where they're taught to do everything they shouldn't do when typing?
Yeah, I think there must be. I'm positive. Because the thing is, you're dealing with like 5 parish secretaries. They're all doing the same thing. And you think, and the wrong thing at that. And you're like, well, where did you learn that? And this is the problem. I've said this to Mike. Both Mike and I, since the mid-90s, have been in a professional body called the Learning and Performance Institute. Now, it used to be called the Institute of IT Training, which was why we were in it. But they changed the name, Learning and Performance Institute. And we're both now actually fellows of it, aren't we? And they had this big thing. And I always say to Mike, a new learning thing comes in. And they're all over it like a rash. Oh, this is the way forward. This is what you've got to do. Right. So we've had self-paced training. We've had face-to-face training. We've had online training. And one of the latest things is collaborative learning. The water cooler moments. Well, I go white because what happens is you've got one person, right, who is honest and says, I don't know how to do that. So I'll ask somebody at work. So they ask, their peer group, and there's 6 people in their peer group. Who's going to answer that, and whose answer is going to be taken as gospel truth? The one with the loudest voice. Are they likely to be the one that knows the most? No, they're not. And that's how bad practice permeates through companies, and in this case, parish secretaries. I think, I can imagine a parish secretary ringing another parish secretary and saying, I've got some copying and there's 2 spaces after every full stop. Oh, yes, that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. It's all very well saying that best practice will ripple through an organisation. Yes, it will, but so will bad practice. And I think you need somebody there to say, no, you don't do that. This is the better way to do it. But a lot of the time in work situations, it's the one with the loudest voice or the most pushy person that gets their way or the highway. Do you know, that reminds me of Mabel's Rules. This is a funny one, but the principle's identical. My grandmother used to play cards at Christmas with the family. And we used to play this game. And in this game, you could have aces high. So you were like, I think it was called Newmarket, wasn't it, the game?
Yeah.
Aces were high. It was as simple as that. It wasn't a 1, it was high. Well, she started playing cards with another group of people. Once she got retired, she started playing cards with this group of people. And aces were low. So when it came to Christmas, she came in and she says, oh, aces low. And my mum would not have it. Aces were high. Oh, no, those are Mabel's rules. And mum's like, but it makes no sense because you've got to get to a point where you get that ace out, if you're with me. And if it's the lowest card, then where's the jeopardy? Gran wouldn't have it, that aces were high, and mum wouldn't have it that aces were low. And there's an example. Whose rules apply? Well, clearly when my grandmother was playing Mabel's rules because she's playing with Mabel. And this is what happens. So I totally agree with you, Peter. It's all very well, this collaborative learning, but it presupposes you're collaborating with somebody who knows what they're talking about and not somebody vacuous who's got lots to say.
Okay, another comment from Gracie J7Y said, I wanted to say thank you and let Elaine know that I sorted my export issue. This was from last week, if you remember, by eventually being able to make a copy and opening it in the new Affinity layout.
Excellent. That was one of the suggestions, wasn't it? So it's good that worked.
Dee said the quality of these streams is always top notch. Why can't others do proper presentations?
I've got no idea. I have no control over what others do, but thank you very much for the comment. I'm liking Tish there. I'd be all this ain't Mabel's house. You sound just like my mother. Absolutely. What else we got?
Moose Chappie says, sometime can you do a tutorial on placing an image across spreads and printing back to back?
Yeah, I've got somebody else who's interested in printing back to back as well, which I'm going to look at. Placing an image across a spread is straightforward. Do that right now. We had in here, didn't we? Let's get a new one. Right, so I've got an A5 document. I'm going to say multiple pages. I'm going to say 8 pages. So it's a multiple, and away we go. So this is our spread. And all I need to do to place an image across a spread is literally draw out the placeholder across the spread, which looks like that. And then let's go and get a stock image. Should we have the Eiffel Tower one? Let's drag and drop the Eiffel Tower in like that. And that will work across the spread. Now, if you then produce that to pages, what you'll get is half of that image on one page and half of it on the other. But if you were printing it and using the spreads to print it, it's as simple as that. Now, the back-to-back printing is slightly different depending on what you're doing. If you are printing something like the newsletter, so something like this, that will print out fine. Now, you saw it wasn't printing out brilliantly. When I did Command and P, this setup isn't right. But I'd have to make sure that double-sided was on, and I'd have to make sure that this was this size, and then I'd have to do impositions of pages and scaling and all kinds of things. So I would have to learn how this printer works for that. But I never print, so that's why it's not set up. But I would have to do that in here to make that work. You can create presets in there. So you can see I've got a couple of presets. But I think they shipped with it. I mean, I print about once a year, which I think is about what you do, isn't it? I can't remember the last thing I printed. It was probably a returns label for Amazon.
I think it was for me.
Which, you could do with a Sharpie at a pinch. But I printed it. But that's about the only time that I print. So that's going to be a little bit more difficult depending on what it is you're actually trying to do. But to get an image across a spread is as straightforward as that. Right, have we got anything else?
From SFN. Would that image work if you had bleed?
Yes, it would. So all you'd need to do in that circumstance, so let's get a new document. We'll do the same again. So 8 pages, multi-page, away we go. Right, now this document at this point does not have a bleed. But you can go back into the document setup and you can add a bleed to it. a standard bleed being 3 millimeters, and OK. And that adds that bleed to it. The only difference is what I did before was I went to the document origin to add that. And what I would do this time is draw it from one corner of the bleed to the other corner of the bleed. Then when I add my stock image to it, so let's get one that's the right ratio. Let's add that one. Right, that image then, if you look at it here, is going into the bleed. So if you did send that for print, it would look absolutely fine. And that's the only difference. Now you may be thinking, well, hang on a minute. No, it's not. Because if it's going into the bleed at the top, bottom, right and left of the spread, what happens in the middle? But we discussed this. We did a deep dive on that. Let me do this and see if we can force it to do it. Right. When I send mine for print, it goes to printed easy. So I've got all my pages here, but it's not actually, that's not helpful, is it? I want to see this one. So let's make sure that this is the right one. Give me a preview of it. Go on. You're not, are you? Fine. Right. So what I'm doing is, this is how I would send it to my printer. Now, this is obviously the front cover, and that's why it's blank. But if I do an export of this, like this, we should see it. So let's put printed easy. And go and get it. There is my PDF. And what happens is, you can see that pages 2 and 3 that have got the image on it, it has a bleed. These lines that we've got here, so let's zoom in so you can see it. Right, where are we? There. These lines represent the bleed. And you can see we've got this bleed, which is the outer edge of page 2. But at the other end of page 2, we actually have a bleed, even though we didn't specify that. So we gave it a bleed of 3 millimeters all the way around. It sorted the rest out. So when my documents go for print, that's exactly what they look like. And they do work because I've had them come back like that. So if we look at this one, you can see that is on the left-hand side. So it marries up with this bit here. But we want to see what that looks like at this point, which is the center of the page. And the center of the page is there. That line indicates where the fold would be. But you can see it's going to overprint it, so it doesn't have any problems. Now, what we discussed, which session was it that we did it? It was at the end, wasn't it? A couple of weeks back. I got the question and I can't remember which session it was, but we'll find it. And I actually went through all of that and explained it because we had that question. And the thing was, the person who was trying to sort it out was thinking that they would need to make changes at this level, that they would need to split these spreads into pages and manually create the bleed. You don't need to do that. Affinity will do that for you. And you've seen that in the output there. You can actually physically see it. That this part and this part, those two would join together. So from this document, you can either create a digital output with no bleed showing and there's full spread. So let's do that. Right, to do that, instead of sending it to print, I would send it out to digital high quality. I wouldn't say all pages, I would say all spreads, and then export it. So we'll call that spread so we know which is which, and I will open it. The file is identical, but look at the different output. This one is going off to the printers, and this one is for digital distribution. But the source file is the same source file. Simple as that.
Mike Brett says it was him and it does work.
Excellent. Excellent. I wasn't going to name names, but thank you, Mike.
He's put it in the chat.
Thank you for confirming that I wasn't making that up. Right.
SFN said, does it add extra or does it lose a bit of the image in the gutter?
You don't lose anything in the gutter. It actually duplicates it because that's what it would need to do to kind of line it up. But it works. Trust me, it works. I've shown you that document.
Karen also says she was able to do that for a PDF spread this week and it worked.
Excellent. Right, let me have a look here. Oh dear. Right, that's not what I want. I don't want to do that. Right, I've just dropped it on the keyboard. Right, I'm having a look at this document that I've got. I haven't got anything going into the bleed, nor have I got that there. So, yeah, this document that I'm looking at is a physical document and it was printed on black. And of course, if it didn't work, I'd have a white stripe on it. So for this document, the background black, let's see if I can do magic. Right, let's have a look at this. Where are we? Right. Need to do that. I'm not thinking that that's working. Oh, hang on. Is it? No, it's not. I don't know if that's working or not. This is my webcam. Let's see if it's working. Oh, it is. Excellent. Right. You look at that document there. If that hadn't worked properly, we'd have potentially a white line up the middle of that. So what got put in that bleed area was the black background. And obviously there's multiple pages to that. So hold this carefully. It would have that in the middle as well, which is fully black. And this back bit there does have images in it. So what was going into the bleed in that document was the black background. So you don't lose anything. Everything you need is there. Trust me, it works. That one has come back. You can see it's a physical document. It is a physical document. I'm not lying. Right, I do have that document somewhere. Let's see if I could do that. So let me just do this and see if I can find it. Do you know, it should be in the right place, shouldn't it? It'd be good if it was in the right place, wouldn't it, Mike? Dinner brochure 2025. Oh, there's all sorts in here. Which one is it? Program. Affinity publisher. Oh, yes, I did this before this one came out. So I'm opening the real file. It's telling me it's a publisher file, but that's the file you've just seen. So what's going into the bleed here is the background. And if it didn't, if this bit in the middle cut straight off, you'd see white, or there's a chance that you would see white. So when I produce that document, I can go for digital high quality, and you can see what would be produced is the spreads, but I can just as easily go to printed easy, make sure that I choose all pages, and then what happens here is it feeds into the bleed. So if I export that to that folder and then open it, so where are we? There we go. That is what that looks like when it goes for print. So into the bleed, you can see the background going into the bleed. I didn't create that, it did. I gave it a 3mm bleed all the way round, and then I created the document. I didn't do anything else with it other than just produce it and send it for print. And you've seen what comes back physically. So the bleed is taken care of. So it does work. I can guarantee it works. I'm not going to say it wasn't hairy scary the first time we sent stuff off, was it? But we did pay to have a mock-up that made, didn't we? And it looked all right. So we said, right, we'll go for it. Yes, it does work. Honestly, it does. Right, let's get rid of that. Okay. There you go. Now, you see, Annie would know. Annie worked as a print angel, weren't you? So, yes, it does. Right. Okay. Did I see somebody say they found blue sky?
Yeah, Tish, I think.
Excellent. I do like blue sky. What I do to make it interesting for me is I follow like the Apple News, and that, well, apart from Trump and his ballroom and Apple paying for it, it's been interesting that you get the news straight away. But it's like old school Twitter. Right, okay then. I think we've yacked on for long enough, haven't we? Before people are horrified at the length of the video. But we'll be back next time. Fun and games.
Oh, we've got one more question.
Go
on. From Grace. Printing. I was told if litho printing, then export as spread and digital printing as pages. Is that correct?
It depends on what your print service wants. I've heard wild and wonderful things as to what a print service wants. And it's like Annie says, each one does things their own way. Some of them, I went out to train one many years ago, and they had equipment that looked like it'd come out of the ark. And because of that, their equipment was old, and they had to do things in a certain way. Now, if they wanted to invest, £100,000 in more equipment, great. Then they could use more modern production techniques. But it worked. So their instructions that they gave their clients could be different than the print house across the road because they've got brand new equipment. It just depends. So you can't really advise and be 100% sure that what you're saying is correct, because it's going out, and as soon as you get somebody else involved, like a print service or even a printer involved, a physical printer, the way I would have to configure it for my printer would be different than how you would configure it for yours. So that's why I didn't spend too long looking at the print side of it, because everything I say could be the complete opposite for you depending on what printer you've got. But when you are sending it for print, the most difficult thing is the instructions always tend to be InDesign. So the screenshots, the words they use, the terminology, it all tends to be InDesign. But if you work through it methodically, it will work in Affinity. And you can always talk to your printer. They'd much rather you talk to them before they start than tell them it isn't right when they've finished. So I would get the definitive answer from whoever is printing it.
Okay, should we just give a name check to Tishy's grandpa, who's 83 today?
Wow! Happy birthday, Tishy's grandfather. That is an age, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, in this day and age, you've got many years left. I shall see you again next year, and I think we should plan for the 100th, don't you? Yeah. Absolutely. That's wonderful. Happy many returns to you. Excellent. Right, is that it?
Yep.
Okay, then we will head off. So don't forget, next week, fun and games, and you will also learn a lot as well. We will be looking at tables from a different aspect. What else have I got? Formatting, table formats as well. I've got imports. I'll do an import. We'll see how that goes. So basically anything can go. So if you've got a game that you would like to do, like Hangman or something, then let me know. But next week will be full of fun and games. But for the moment, I'm going to say good night from me.
And good night from me.
We will both see you next time. Stay safe, guys.